What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki coming at you guys with a quirk analysis video. Wanted to start off this series, whatever I decide to go with the final title of it being, with a video on Eri, especially with the latest chapter of My Hero Academia being chapter 292 that's been officially released, and a lot of people being concerned about how broken she'll be for the story, or whether or not she'll invalidate stakes, or things like that. But I also just kind of think I might have finally nailed down how Eri's quirk is going to end up working throughout the story, and why her very character arc is designed to prevent that from ever happening. But before we get into that, we have to kind of start with what Aries Rewind is established to be as a quirk, and it's simply the ability to rewind living things. Overhaul says humans, but we also see him testing it on rats, so we know that it affects living organic beings. In addition to that, since he mixed rock with himself when he fused himself with his ally, I'd assume that it's not quite so cut and dry as humans, so much it's necessarily living beings. Furthermore, they would have had to do some testing with the quirk, and that's what they did with the mice. So living things, not just humans, but that's kind of how he was talking about it, because what Overhaul was discussing was overall what his eventual application of the quirk would be. His focus was more around the idea of like how it would be used and what he considered the proper utilization of her quirk. So that's why he emphasizes humans so much, and the fact that he was creating a quirk factor erasing drug, and a drug that was being also made to undo the quirk erasing drug, because of the fact that that's the peak of Ares' power in his mind. But real quick, I kind of want to talk about how, yes, Ares Quirk Rewind has a lot of potential. It can heal people. It enabled Deku to do the infinite 100%. But I think a lot of people are ignoring some of the things that happen around these events in the story, and what they actually end up enabling as a fallout or a consequence of it, because Horikoshi does not give without taking when it comes to quirks. That's one of the things that's really balanced about this system, especially with Eri having a quirk. Seeming to be another one of those like Gen X, next generation type perk users. But before we get into that, like just looking at the way that Horikoshi has utilized Ares quirk real quick, if you think about it, during the overhaul arc, the only time we really see her activated is during this one big burst, or these 2-3 bursts here and there, where she starts to use it so she can get free. And the thing is, you could argue that she never stopped using it, because she just came out of physical contact with overhaul. That's what allowed her to stop rewinding him for a bit, and then maybe the shock of Deku kicking her up into the air would have caused her to disable her quirk for a brief moment, only for her to reactivate it in fear. Because, it's during that moment which Overhaul explains that her quirk is the ability to rewind, or rather we get the narrator explanation that it's the ability to rewind. It allows her to take things and turn them back to how they were. And one of the things that I think is especially important is the mental state that Aries in. She's contemplating the fact that all these people are dying because of her. She's thinking about the fact that her quirk is so destructive. She's really thinking about, once again, how her existence is cursed, but she wants to be saved. She finally wants to experience, that like self-love. And then that's kind of what leads to the quirk activating and, disabling the chimera overhaul that she was being captured by at the time. Now, let's look at what was happening when she was on Deku's back. She goes on Deku's back. She's attempting to utilize her quirk after the floodgates have already been opened. She's just kind of pouring the energy into him. As the fight goes on, though, Deku eventually manages to win by breaking apart his body even more. The issue here is that she has no idea how to stop, and as she realizes she doesn't know how to stop, Overhaul's words play back into her mind again. She starts to think about how she doesn't have value, how she loathes herself, how it's her cursed existence, and then it's thanks to Eraserhead being there that we get to see that she's stopped, thanks to Eraserhead's quirk, none for all. So we consistently see that she's, one, either stopped by Eraserhead, or two, in a lot of states of high emotional distress. This is kind of similar to how Shigaraki's quirk built up over time with that killing intent and that itch, to the extent where within the family, it seemed normal for him to have this itch. They, regularly treat it with creams and whatnot, only for it to come spilling forth later, wiping everybody out. You know what I mean? So there's a certain level of, when you have these quirks, when you're this white-haired, red-eyed, high-tier quirk user, your quirk, one, has a huge impact on your personality, but two, it usually has like these grandiose manifestations early, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, when you compare it, with, you got people like Shigaraki, you got people like Eri, who accidentally rewound her father out of existence. You've got Nine, who, with the nature of his quirk, realistically, like, dropped lightning on someone, probably killing family members. Who knows? There's just a lot of things that seem to be going on here with these white-haired quirks. Even when you look at the way Dobby's quirk works, he starts off having a manageable fire, but as his time goes on and becomes more filled with resentment, it's like this negativity spilled over, and all of a sudden his hair is white. He's got this destructive quirk. But I would say that Dobby is not a post-singularity child in the same way that Shigaraki and Eri likely are. And same way with Nine, due to the fact that, those are people who are considered candidates for wielding All for One and having those bodies, and Dobby doesn't. I just think that Dobby has a quirk that in of itself is in that factor. So, but I digress. That's slightly tangential to what I'm talking about, but I just kind of wanted to get across the point that we have a history of huge quirks, these quirks having built up and affecting the person's personality. And with the case of Nine, for example, his quirk allowed him to affect the weather, the very skies itself. So it became natural to him that a person who can control the skies would look down on all the people beneath it. And that's kind of what led to him really believing that he deserved to rule, and why, like, his quirk's impact on his psyche. And so when you look at Eri, and you look at the fact that during the story, she rewound Deku, but in the process, either she's not aware of this, but she rewound Deku, and in the process, that led to Night Eye dying. That's the implementation that Horikoshi has used with this now. But in the process of actually helping Deku out, rewinding him, not being informed of that, she's been able to move past, and her horn is stacking up way slower after that point within the story. She manages to dump all that energy into Deku, she dumps all that energy in a rewinding overhaul, and yes, she can't save Night Eye, but now, thanks to the fact that she's, released this excess energy, she's free of the quirk, at least temporarily bursting forward from the seams. Now, like, we fast forward through the story, you have chapters like 184, where there's the return of Eri, and she shows up, and that's how we get the confirmation that she's going to be living at UA. You move forward in the story, and we get the revelation that it is a stockpile quirk, and we don't, like, Monoma doesn't tell us what the quirk needs to stockpile to be powerful. What Monoma does is just simply states that's why he can't just replicate it in Teacher. You have 242. You have like a slight increase in her horn size. Her, she's like really kind of like sad about it, but at the same time, like, she's in a better spot. It's around the time of the Christmas chapter, I believe. You fast forward though a couple more chapters, and when we see Eri, she's upset. She's with the big three. Her horn is acting up, and then a little while later, Aizawa straight up decides that he's going to train her. And so as we transition through these parts of the story. And so then you fast forward to what's happened now. Like, we've been seeing Eri's quirk manifesting, acting up, the differences. We've been keeping track of her horn. And then you see that Eri has used her power once again to enable the power of another hero so that he can get onto the battlefield. In this case, it's Lemillion. But to also think about it another way is that now that we've established that we're in a spot where Lemillion is fully powered up, Eri has even less things to be sad about. As Ian talks about on the streams a lot, what we have been doing with Eri is taking back the things that Overhaul took from her peace, her happiness, her, ability to, like, have self-respect and, like, love for her quirk. And she's been slowly getting this back. She's got that smile back. And so Overhaul took Muriel's quirk. She's gotten to give that back now. She's been able to take back everything that the ways that the people around her have been hurt by Overhaul. She's gotten to give that gift back, and they've never properly informed her of who Night Eye is or any of those things, it seems like, mostly to make sure that she doesn't end up in a mournful state, which would have been counterintuitive to helping her progress. Which, the most important part about that is that after we find out that she's getting trained, after all that, the next time we see Eri is in chapter 276, a chapter that is also titled You Cheated, which in of itself I think is kind of a bit of foreshadowing for what her horn is doing here, because in that chapter specifically, her horn is finally tiny, and that's when she's watching it on stream with All Might. Now, that's how I know that Horikoshi is very mindful of the power of this quirk. Yes, Rewind has a lot of potential to constantly heal people, to save people, but right now Eri's only like 5 or 6. She's not able to generate and stockpile a lot of that energy quickly, and she's only got like 1 or 2 charges really, and it was kind of just overhaul, constantly resetting her and causing such intense traumas to her body that allowed her to keep having this. Because, and this is important, I believe that Aries Quirk stockpiles regret. Now, this goes into with the themes of individualities and quirks within the series, and how, like we said, with Shigaraki's destruction quirk, it makes him itchy. It makes his skin start to tear apart. If he overuses it, he starts to break down. But like, it is a necessary expression. Even when we look at Dabi, like, one of the things I kind of think about is how over time his hair turns white too, just like the rest of them. Even though his eyes aren't red, I think about the way his quirk slowly burns his body down. But the fact is also that his quirk is cooking Shoto too, which means that Dabi might not even be weak to fire. His fire just might be that powerful, which would also kind of like highlight how the quirk singularity theory is the quirk doomsday theory, and how that works out. And his anger is what fuels these extra flames, keeping them so potent. And like, that's the way he's been expressed. Think about what I said earlier with 9, controlling the weather. So you have Eri, a character who was put into an extremely traumatic situation, who's constantly ingesting trauma, or was constantly ingesting trauma, constantly being made to dislike herself, constantly being made to hate herself, building up all these regrets and loathing by just existing. And now you've taken that catalyst away from her. You've removed her not necessarily her need for regret, but rather the source of those regrets. So Eri has also more or less been narratively nerfed by the fact that her entire goal as a character is to move away from her pain of her past, and not to sit in the past, not wallow in it, not be stuck in the past. Which, think about it, people who have lots of regrets are always hoping they can rewind time, go back in time, fix the things and the mistakes. That's her gift. She can go rewind things, make things back how they used to be. And so it would make sense that the desire to go back, the desire for the past to fix that regret itself, would be the fuel of Aries Quirk. And because her character arc is so heavily tied to moving away from that, because she's 5, 6, 7 years old, and she's not going to look at this situation to be like, wow, if I didn't heal a million here, maybe I would have been able to make sure that Deku's arm. She's just going to be like, oh, I wish I had more power, and so then I could help him up. But that's not going to be her sitting there guilt tripping herself, blaming herself for saving Mirio and giving him his quirk back. And so when Deku's arms are stuck like this, we can expect it, at least, even if he were to get these arms back, another couple months, maybe even a year, because Eri is not that in an emotionally distraught and terrifying state anymore. She's very much in a position now where she should be happy. She shouldn't be acquiring regret. She shouldn't be, loathing herself, and she's being properly trained by Aizawa, as he made it a point to do before the time skip. That's one of the things that I also think is important to note, is that during the feast, it's easy to think about like the hot pot stuff, but when Aizawa and All Might have that conversation, it's directly stated that her training was going to begin. And then after that conversation, we get the time skip where we cut to the 3 months, to the day of the hospital invasion, where the heroes vanish from the streets. So Horikoshi has been very mindful of this entire time. Almost every time we've seen Aries' power manifest, it's after she is specifically lamentful, specifically mournful, and that's kind of what leads to, like, even when you see her horn acting up, she's usually like kind of gloomy or down on herself. So in general, I think that's kind of where Horikoshi has been going with this power, is that because of the fact that Aries' life goal is to be something so far removed from her quirk, she will never be able to be a major MacGuffin, because she'll never be able to acquire enough regret to break the story. That's what I think is being established here. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rewind is going to be broken anyway, and she'll just be like that. But the way I look at it, because of the way that Aries' character has been structured, and because of the time frame that I see the story lasting, I don't see her being a 16, 17, 18-year-old at any point in the story, where smaller amounts of regret may go for more distance. Like just her natural abilities being heightened so that she doesn't need as much energy to fuel these interactions. So as long as Aries 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we're in this small time frame where she's not going to be getting extensive training, she's not being trained to be a hero, she's being trained to make sure that her quirk stays under control, then at that point, she shouldn't be able to break the story, and I'm fine with that. Horikoshi has basically put his story on a time frame where we know that we won't probably be going more than 10 years into the future, so that way she can't be too powerful, and we know that she won't be able to fix everything because she won't be powerful enough or trained well enough. And if she does get to this point, one of the things that I could see possibly happening isn't a smooth, she just gets to fix things. I see more problems being born than fixed in the beginning. Aerie does tend to have a lot of similarities to Scarlet Witch in that she's kind of, more lamenting, sad character. Regularly does appear in red dresses, like Aerie Claus back at the Culture Festival when she was making her big appearance, another red dress scene. So overall, I think that there's a lot of potential for Aerie to, like no more mutants or whatever. If that's the direction, if Aerie's going to become super powerful, I think that's the direction it's going to go into more of a disaster state where that's going to be her acquiring more things and that's going to be her fuel is like the big cataclysm caused by her quirk, if that's what's going to happen. So either we get a really bonkers plot where Quirk is borderline a villain, even if she is not, or I think we're going to stick with this more grounded approach where she gets to strive to have a peaceful and normal life, and thus her quirk is not heavily fueled, and she just ends up going about her day living her best life as she can with all the circumstances that we have going on with the villains and stuff. But with her being a child, she's not going to be sitting there getting all the socio-political information. So overall, I think we're in a really good spot with Aerie. Let me know if you still think Aerie's going to be OP, or if you think that Rewind is a broken quirk with a balanced character controlling it. That's all I really got to say about this. Please don't drop spoilers, anything like that in the comments, because I don't read scans. I'm an officials only guy. That's why I do my live reactions on Sundays. But yeah, if you enjoyed what I had to say, then come back through Sunday for the Church of MHA. That's all we got left here. Anarchy out.